What's up, Weirdo Swarm, and welcome back to another episode of Podagon Infinity, the podcast that opens the door to all things King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. My name is Joe.
My name is Spencer, and today we're going to be talking about one of the heavier entries into the King Giz catalog. Today we're talking about 2019's Infest the Rat's Nest. In fact, an album that's celebrating its 5-year anniversary as we record this episode today, August 16th, 2019. Today is August the 16th, 2024, and Joe, this wasn't an intentional choice as far as how the dates lined up, but it worked out okay, yeah?
Yeah, we didn't exactly plan it out that way, it just kind of worked out. We discussed doing this album as our second album discussion a few weeks ago, and you sent me a screenshot the other day of the date the album came out, and you're like, take a look at this. I guess we chose correctly for which album we're talking about this week.
Yeah, and I think it originally came as sort of made sense to naturally piggyback off of Fishing for Fishies, which came out earlier in 2019, and this album was almost a dramatic foil of sorts to Fishies. Some similar lyrical themes and messages behind it, which we'll get into once we get into our track-by-track, but suffice to say, I think this will be the first challenging one that some of the Giz newcomers will face who are listening to our podcast. We took it easy on you all at first. We gave you a very approachable Fishing for Fishies. We gave you an almost equally approachable and friendly and fun, I might add, Flight B741. We are not taking it easy on you newbies anymore. Buckle up. Be ready for a hell of a ride.
Yes, indeed, where Fishies was giving you an environmentally conscious theme all set in a bouncy blues rock style, this album, Infest the Rat's Nest, is, well, the theming is kind of similar and kind of a continuation of the same kind of message, but this time, it's not just a message anymore. It's not just words anymore. This time, it's, here's the consequences of your actions. Here's where the world's going if we keep doing what we're doing to this planet. We're not mincing words anymore. We're pissed off. Look at what you did to this poor Earth.
Yeah, that's exactly kind of the overall message and feel of this album. But hey, Joe, before we get too pissed off, you want to read a listener email?
Oh yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to. We have just one listener message this week, and I did want to apologize real quick if our listener messages segment went on a little long last week, but since it was the first time we did it, and, those people took the time to reach out to us and say some nice things and give some input, we just wanted to give them our time in return and read their full messages. But this week, it'll be a quick one. We have just one message that we got via our email, podagoninfinity@gmail.com, and that's from Ruben. Ruben says, "Hey guys, been listening to Gizzard solidly for a few years now. Although they were on my radar for a long time, it seemed like too much effort to really get into them. Then, once I did, I can say they've actually changed my life. I've never been so hooked on a band. I thought it might be worth addressing the Gizverse podcast at some point on your show too. I'm sure you're aware of them as they've been going on for several years now, but they are not uploading all that frequently anymore. They are fairly popular among the fan base, and I don't know if new listeners of your show would think you're trying to take their place, parenthesis, which I don't believe you are. After all, we're all Gizheads." They also put in a little submission for our Most of What We Like segment, which we're going to do later on at the end of this episode, but I just wanted to address Ruben's suggestion here. They say, "Most of what I like right now, you have to check out the debut album by Tapir. If you've not heard that, it released earlier this year and it's incredible. Also, this one goes back a little, but last year, HMLTD, or I don't know if that's supposed to be pronounced or if it's just an acronym, I'm not familiar with them, but they released The Worm, which is without a doubt one of the most engaging and deep concept albums I've ever heard. On the surface, it seems to be a fantasy story about someone fighting worms which have taken over the world, but then it descends into a look at relationships, mental health, and capitalism. Extraordinary album, even has a whole companion book of lore worth reading." Sounds really cool. I'm not familiar with that. We'll have to take a look into that later.
Yeah.
They say, "Look forward to the next pod. Hopefully you'll be giving your thoughts and breaking down the new album. Personally, it's not quite grabbing me yet, but it's an enjoyable listen with a few real gems. Thanks, Ruben." Well, Ruben, I can answer that last part real quick, easily. I guess you reached out before we uploaded our last episode. That was just last week, but we just talked about B741. It wasn't quite a super deep album analysis because it is brand new, but we still talked for almost an hour just giving our reactions and first thoughts on it. So we hope you've listened to that by now and enjoyed it.
Yeah, we hope you've enjoyed that episode, and sorry to hear the new album isn't quite grabbing you as much, but give it time. Maybe it will grab you with time. Maybe it won't. Every Gizhead does have their own tastes within the catalog. To actually respond to his mention of Tapir, which is how that artist's name is pronounced, I actually discovered them not long ago. Taper, which the exclamation point after the name, that is actually canonical. That is how the band's name is written out. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not
I
just
thought they were
Taper.
just really excited.
No, it's not just Taper. It's Taper. And it's named after it's named after some cute little animal that I guess lives in the the jungles of South America or something like that. And anyway, this album is it has like a melancholy overtone to it all, at least in my opinion. But it has just it kind of defies description. It has this whole central storyline running through it that I'm still trying to make heads or tails of personally, if I'm being honest. But the music is really kind of soothing and kind of chill for the most part. It does have some more upbeat tracks to it, but it is worth a listen, definitely. I would recommend listening to Taper. I have not heard of The Worm or HMLTD, or however that may be pronounced, but as Joe read that section of the email, God, that really sounds like something that's worth checking out. I mean, worms taking over the world.
Yeah,
and then also...
Your description definitely has my attention. I'm definitely going to be listening to that after we finish recording for the day.
Yeah, and then also looking at, relationships, mental health, and capitalism. Okay, so
it's got everything, doesn't it?
It's got the whole kitchen sink, man. So yeah, we'll look into that. Also, to address the Gizzard podcast, which you mentioned, Ruben, yes, we are familiar with them. I have at least personally listened to every one of their episodes. I think Tommy and Brian are two super fun and cool guys, and down the road, nothing set in stone. We haven't made contact with them just yet, but we're excited to be kind of Gizzy podcast neighbors with them, if you will. We obviously have no intention of stepping on their toes or taking their idea, but yeah, we look forward to maybe interacting with them down the road, and who knows what time will bring. Tommy and Brian on the Gizverse podcast do great work, and anyone who is listening to our podcast and hasn't heard theirs yet, absolutely worth a listen. They're two very cool guys, as I just said.
So that is our one message for the day. Thank you so much again, Ruben, for reaching out. Again, if you would like to send us a message and have it read on the show with any talking point suggestions or just general questions for us or anything about the band, feel free to reach out via our email, podagoninfinity@gmail.com, or just DM us on any of our social media pages.
Yeah, what Joe said. Dude, let's thrash. Let's rock. Let's shred.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Okay, Infest the Rat's Nest. Man, I love this album. It is so different than what we talked about last week. Like we said, it's a complete contrast to Fishing for Fishies and to a lot of their more chill albums, but this is their first venture into real straight up like thrash metal. It's a straight up like old school kind of gritty sounding thrash metal album. As Spencer mentioned, it was released on August 16th, 2019, exactly 5 years ago to the day that we are recording this, and it was studio album number 15.
Yeah, I think this was, and I really highlight, I think, that this was the second King Gizzard album I ever listened to, because, Joe, I vaguely remember you kind of introducing me to their different styles and saying, okay, if you want a little touch of heavy metal, you might check out Infest the Rat's Nest, which came out the very same year as that gentle, approachable, fun, and bouncy Fishing for Fishies. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And, of course, I was greeted with what it is, just this scathing, scorching, almost kind of retro-feeling heavy metal. And if I recall correctly, I didn't latch on fully to this entire album at first, although there were plenty of licks and a couple of songs that I really did enjoy. This one took me a little bit to get around to, but with some time, I think I've really identified the most standout tracks. We'll get into those later, and dude, I can't wait to talk about this album.
Yeah, I vaguely remember telling you to listen to this one early on when getting you into the band as well, because I wanted you to hear the vast diversity of their catalog. So I was like, okay, what's better than this? You know, he liked Fishing for Fishies, kind of that upbeat, jammy blues rock stuff. Okay. Now listen to this other one and see, the whole range that they're capable of. So I tend to do that a lot with people when I tell them about this band. I'm like, okay, here's one album or song I think you'll like, and here's the complete opposite, just to show you what they can do. It's kind of funny that this was your second album. I was thinking about it, and I mentioned this before, so Fishing for Fishies was like the album that really got me into the band. That was the first one that I listened to all the way through and was immediately hooked on. But I think before I really got into the band, I think I might have actually heard this album first. I wasn't really into the band at this time in 2019 yet. I kind of started getting into them more in like 2020, maybe 21, somewhere between there. But I remember a friend of mine who's not even particularly that big of a Gizzhead, but he likes some other stuff, telling me to listen to this album when it came out because he knew I was into a lot of heavy metal and, a lot of different similar sounding bands. So he told me to listen to it, and I vividly remember listening to it in his apartment and just being blown away, like, holy shit, this is something else. This is right up my alley. And it like you said, it didn't necessarily stick with you the first time you heard it. For me, I knew I liked it, but it took a few more listens to really be able to like separate the different songs in my mind and find the moments that I really liked most. But I do vividly remember just in general enjoying it the first time I heard it.
Yeah, I think that there are albums that are more complex in this one, and so just clarifying the point that it really didn't take all that long to eventually come around to this. But I'm a sucker for some heavy riffs, and this album is chock full of them.
So as we mentioned, this album has a heavy, environmental conscious tone about it, just like Fishing for Fishies did, but it does it in a little bit more of an aggressive way. And I also feel like this album is more of what you could call a concept album than Fishies is. Fishies has a general kind of tone and idea throughout the whole thing, but it's not really that much of a continuous story, it doesn't feel like. This album is more of a full story and full concept, which I think is part of what makes it really interesting to follow along with what's going on here. So I think we should take a look at where that story starts and what we first heard when we popped on this album for the first time. Spencer, you want to get us started with the very first track on this album?
Yeah, the lead-off track is Planet B.
There is no Planet B. Open your eyes and see.
Starts off right from the get-go with those rolling drums from Calves. And by the way, we should mention right from the top here, only 3 of the, at the time, 7 members of the band were involved in the recording of this album. It was only Stu, Joey, and Calves. I guess the background on that was the 3 of them were mainly the ones who were influenced by a lot of the heavy metal sound in their younger years. And so they were just kind of jamming in the studio, based on my research and understanding here. They were jamming in the studio, and a lot of what they jammed to basically ended up becoming fleshed out into the eventual completed album. So the others, of course, in very short order on the following tour, they would end up playing those songs at live shows, but it was just those 3 guys who were playing this album in the studio. And you would never guess it. Like, this album brings so much more power and brute force than you would think that 3 people can do, but it just knocks you right over the head from the get-go here on Planet B.
Yeah, right off the top, the album starts with this intense, fast, double kick drum going absolutely apeshit, and that's the only thing you hear for the first few seconds before some guitar feedback comes in and the main riff starts chugging along. It is a hell of a way to get your attention and get this album started.
So this song is really talking about how the Earth is just going into the toilet, basically. Everything is on fire, essentially. All natural resources are being exhausted or have already been exhausted. You just look at some of the very first lyrics on this track. Low on meals, browning fields, bury children, urbanization, scarification, population exodus. The world is turning to ruin, and it's becoming uninhabitable, and this really sets the stage for the rest of the album.
Yeah, a lot of the lyrics throughout this whole album are very straightforward and to the point what they're about, and I think there's no better example of this than Planet B. It's straight up telling you like it is. The world is falling apart, we're running out of food, people are dying, and it's our fault. We did this, we destroyed the planet, and there is no Planet B. There will never be a true replacement for our planet Earth.
And I guess one thing that sort of sets apart the lyrical approach between this album and Fishing for Fishies, there's more of a tone of, hey, we're not being nice to the environment, let's be smart, let's take some action and do what we can to help. This album, it's like, oh no, it's too late. No, look at what you've done. This is all the wreck and ruin and destruction you've left behind you in your wake. And for more of a broad like musical theme here, I don't know what it is that tickles my brain in this way, but all the words that end in Asian in this song just have this almost just, they add to the metal feel of it. urbanization, scarification, and then later on, colonization, acclimatization,
Population, exodus.
It's just and just those not even one-liners, one word, little stingers sung by Stu, and one of my favorite parts of this song overall, right about the 1 minute 45 second mark. Monetization, civilization. That's where you get the key change in the song, and what other album are you going to get a key change 145 into the entire freaking album? Like, to me, what that's saying is, hello, are you getting the message? We need to get out of here. This place is a mess. We can't live here.
Listen to me in a higher key now. Maybe you'll hear the message. You'll hear what I'm saying. This is urgent.
Exactly, yeah. This is a serious message.
Yes, peace and love. The earth is fucked.
Yeah, not so much peace and love going on here, although we appreciate you, Ringo. That I don't know if that has much of a place here on this album. But yeah, just a nice fast-paced rocker and plenty of sort of chugging guitar strumming and just the drum beat of calves, as we mentioned, behind it. Just brings it all together into a nice little opening package to start the album.
Yep, and the album wraps up with the very clear message, there is no planet B, over and over again, followed by the last line, open your eyes and see. So we get you, Stu. We hear your message, but where are we going to go from here? What's the next step in this story?
Next step in this story is Mars for the Rich.
Mars for the Rich, track number 2, might be my favorite guitar groove on the whole album. It is so catchy. It starts off right in the beginning with just the guitar, and I love the way these songs kind of flow right into the next, and each one of them starts off with just such a hype, like, attention-grabbing moment. Like with Planet B, it was the just those double bass drums going crazy. This one, it's this catchy as hell, this guitar riff that's kind of the main riff throughout the whole song, and I love it. It's like super groovy, super fun to bang your head to, and I just absolutely love it. Spencer, what do you think about track 2 here? 2 words: Black Sabbath. I could totally hear Ozzy Osbourne singing this song, and the riffs sound like something straight out of the Tony Iommi catalog. I think if I can just think back to a couple of actual Black Sabbath songs, I think the songs Fairies Wear Boots and Children of the Grave come to mind in terms of what that sort of chugging, almost swinging sort of guitar groove bring to mind for me. I'm not hugely into AI and most artistic applications here, but I wonder if something like that, or if we have just some creative listeners in general here who, or even some listeners who have a good Ozzy impression, would maybe be able to like put together like a short little sample of Ozzy singing this song. Oh my God, I think that would be so cool. And that would fulfill like this little wish in my brain. Like, this sounds like it was taken straight from Black Sabbath, and that's in a complimentary way. And I think it's a sign of how many different metal influences, especially more of the old school metal influences, that were present in the making of this album. See, Spencer, this is why I appreciate your expertise in the world of classic rock and heavy metal knowledge, because I knew this sounded like a super classic riff and sounded like something straight out of, like 70s heavy metal, but I never would have been able to perfectly, pick those examples out of my head. And now that you say that, I can totally hear Ozzy on the like singing the main hook of this song, and yeah, straight up Tony Iommi kind of riff as well. I love it. Yeah, if anybody can make that happen, please make Ozzy sing Mars for the Rich. Definitely. And I absolutely love how straightforward the lyrics are, and just continuing that overall theme for the album. Just how the lyrics mince no words. I'm just a poor boy living frugally. I see Mars on TV. I see people happy. I work fields with blistered fingers. I look starward. That world has no place for me. So this guy's maybe not necessarily poor, but he's maybe just like a common middle-class guy who's struggling on this scorched, abandoned, neglected Earth, and he's looking at all these rich people who are able to make it to Mars and just totally start anew. And he's depressed because there's just no hope for him. Yeah, I love the perspective of this whole song being from this one person literally watching TV and describing seeing rich people who were able to afford to escape the tattered and torn up Earth and move to the new civilization on planet Mars, where all the rich people are living healthily and happily away from the screwed up Earth. And of course, this is something that's based somewhat in reality. There has been actual talk from people, I'm looking at you, Elon Musk, about wanting to colonize Mars and be able to move people there eventually. But how the hell is anybody going to afford to get there unless they're super, super rich? I mean, that's a lot coming from, the richest guy on Earth pretty much wants to go live on Mars. Sure. Easier said than done.
You beat me to the punch there, Joe. I had Elon Musk on my mind almost from the very first time I heard this song. Another thing I do appreciate lyrically about this track, the repeated vowel sounds of Red Mars, the Czars, live large. It just gives this cohesion to the song as the guitar continues to chug along. This is such a good track too.
And this track is also a little bit slower of a tempo than Planet B was. Planet B was just right out of the gate, super fast, crazy double bass, all that stuff. This song's got more of a, like I said, a groove. It's a little bit slower, but the energy is not lost on it at all. It's like a perfect tempo to just bang your head to groove along with, to scream all the words, Red Mars for the rich. It is so good, and that's why I can easily say right off the top here, it's one of my favorite tracks on this album. I also love the section towards the end where everything kind of drops out, and it's just the drums and bass, and there's like a bass solo part. And you mentioned just, Stu, Joey, and Cavs being the ones that put this whole album together. I think Joey was doing most of, if not all, the bass on this album. So It kind of makes sense why there's like a full-on bass solo that is just, I've mentioned before that I play bass. So like this part just tickles my brain in the nicest way. I love it. I'm a sucker for a nice little, when the bass gets the limelight a little bit and everything else drops out. It's so good. And then it just ends and the guitar kicks back in. We get one more chorus and all that before it wraps up.
You mentioned that this song is a little bit slower in tempo than the opening track, but it packs no less of a powerful punch nonetheless. If you, the listener, were somehow disappointed, though, by the drop in tempo on this track, how about track 3 for you? Try this one out for size. Organ Farmer.
Organ farmer, do you like a Gizzard? All the profession.
Organ farmer.
That's my impression.
Yeah, like Spencer said, if Mars for the Rich wasn't fast enough for you, we are back in full-on crazy-ass speed mode, just like Planet B, if not maybe faster. I mean, I don't know the exact tempos off the top of my head, but Organ Farmer is nuts. This is, if not the fastest, one of the faster tracks on the album.
Yeah, the first 3 lines of it, make the incision, careful precision, blood minestrone. That's awfully graphic, first of all. Second of all, yeah, you put 2 and 2 together, Organ Farmer, what this song is getting at. But I think that this was one of the songs that was more of an obstacle for me when I first listened to the album. Although fast-paced and heavy and angry, there's something to be said for that. But I think this song initially reminded me too much of some of like the early to mid-2000s metal that I didn't appreciate as much or that I didn't grab onto as much that was out during like my middle school and high school years. Sort of that screamo, just raw, scathing, loud feel. That just wasn't for me. But there is a change in this song, and I'm trying to get the timestamp up here in my notes, right around 1:15, and to me, the song becomes a little more enjoyable. It settles into more of a conventional groove, I think. But I do wonder if what the guys were going for on this track at the beginning and at the end, where the fast-paced chaos takes hold, I wonder if they were going for more of like a parody feel on parts of this song. What do you think of that, Joe?
Yeah, the song seems so like ridiculously aggressive and over the top that I feel like they had to just be kind of writing whatever was just as crazy and fun to them as possible. I agree. This is a little bit tougher one for me to sort of dissect like the other songs. The meaning of it and where its place is in the overall story and theme of this album is a little harder for me to figure out, really. I mean, it seems like it should be pretty straightforward. It's about somebody harvesting human organs and selling them or eating them because maybe there's no other food left to eat on Earth, and so they have to start eating each other. That's my best guess as of what it's supposed to be about, but otherwise it seems like a little bit of an outlier as far as the direct themes go of this whole album.
Outlier's a good way to put it, and we began with a pretty graphic few lines, and we end with a few graphic lines of the song lyrically. Farm colossal, wake the fossil in the fields of beef. That's like one of those answers to the old game. Try and say a sentence that you think has never been said before by anybody in history. Or do you think anybody in history before this song has uttered the phrase "in the fields of beef"?
And it's also I just noticed the shortest song on the album as well. I was thinking it was one of the other ones for some reason, but Organ Farmer is actually the shortest at 2 minutes and 39 seconds, which I guess makes sense because they're really rushing through this one. It's so damn fast. They just couldn't keep up the energy any longer. It had to end at some point, but it still kicks ass, and it's a wild ride from beginning to end. I also wanted to mention real quick, and I forgot to say this about Mars for the Rich, but both Mars for the Rich and Organ Farmer I got to hear live, the one and only time I've seen them, back in fall of 2022 here in Philly. And of course, I'll be seeing them again very soon, so maybe I'll get to hear some of these again. But I remember at the time, I wasn't quite as deep into the band as I am now, and so I didn't know all of their music. A lot of the songs they played were just mysteries to me, but these two stood out. I knew this album at that point, and so I was very hype. The mosh pits were crazy. They were so kick-ass live.
I can only imagine the mosh pits during these songs off of Infest the Rat's Nest. My gosh, yeah, and especially given that Petrodragonic Apocalypse wasn't out just yet at the time you went to that show, so this album really was kind of the sole pinnacle of metal music in the Giz catalog at that time.
This was the metal Giz album at the time. Like you said, we would get Petrodragonic eventually to sort of be a follow-up to this as far as the style goes. But yeah, this was it at the time, and I was very excited to hear them live. You know, everybody was going ballistic when this one came on.
Absolutely. Speaking of going ballistic, I would suspect that this next track sits well for a lot of Giz heads as well. How about Superbug?
Now, right off the first few seconds, it might not sound super ballistic like Organ Farmer did. It starts off slower again, kind of similarly to how Mars for the Rich slowed things down just a little bit. This one sounds like it's slowing things down at first. It's nice and soft and just a little kind of eerie guitar riff. And then you hear this wailing scream off in the distance before the drums do a fill, and it all just kicks the hell in. You hear like... I'm not going to try to repeat it. I'm going to hurt myself. But if you heard the album, you know what I'm talking about. That scream, and then it goes in, and it kind of maintains that tempo the whole time. It is a little slower, but the heaviness is all still there. Don't let those first few seconds trick you.
Yeah, this song is sludgy and doomy. And of course, the central theme of the song is just this relentless virus that is wiping out all remaining human life on Earth. And of course, in hindsight, there's just this inherent eeriness because this album, as we mentioned, came out in August of 2019, and we all know what unfortunately transpired the following spring as COVID-19 came stateside and started unfortunately taking a lot of lives from us. So this was just one of those tracks that people look back on. It's like, oh man, that was unfortunate timing. Of course, that's, nothing that the band or anyone really could have foreseen happening, but it post-COVID, if you can even technically call it that here in the year 2024, the lyrics just sit so much harder with that. These pulling up the lyrics here on Spotify. Superbug coming up, feels like he'll never stop. Should've used phages, instead you took ages. Superbug gave a shrug and ate all your prescription drugs and never, ever, ever stopped. Bringing back memories of 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think this is something that's been talked about a lot among fans, is like they predicted COVID only a couple months in advance. Just kind of bad timing. I'm sure they didn't know or had anything to do with putting that out into the world. I wouldn't blame them for it, but if they did, guys, what the hell?
Seriously. But the chorus on this song, I would argue, is so far the best chorus we have heard so far to this point in the album. Superbug in my blood, superbug made of the disturbing stuff. And then it repeats once over. And the way that Stu sings it, his vocal delivery, just that growly, snarly, menacing. Like, you get the full message that this is bad and we should all be afraid.
Oh, for sure. There's some other lyrics that I really like that start pointing at antibiotics and how this disease or this bacteria may have gotten as strong as it did. There's the lyric, "Superbug is like a truck, penicillin is a duck that's sitting on the road for luck." And so they're talking about, antibiotics, the bacteria becoming resistant to these things that are supposed to kill these bugs and stop these diseases. But the bug became resistant to them. And so the penicillin is doing absolutely nothing, and comparing this thing to a truck that is about to just absolutely mow down a duck in the middle of the road. So, it's kind of opposite now. The antibacterials are supposed to help, but that bug is only going to get stronger when it comes in contact with them.
Yeah, and this virus, this superbug, never ever stops and never ever what?
Never ever gives a fuck.
I mean, it's sitting right there. Yeah, that's I think the tempo of this song was such a brilliant choice on the part of the guys, because it's this slow and creeping, at least on the surface, what it looks like to people, but then it consumes you before you even realize that it's happening. And I also have a note jotted down here that I think it's also a brilliant idea how persistent this track is. It's symbolic of this superbug that's overtaking humanity. Just when you think the song is dying down or fading out later on, I mean, you get to some of those slower, quieter groove parts, you think, okay, this song is probably wrapping up. If you're none the wiser and you're not looking at your Spotify app or your music app and seeing where you are on the timestamp. But just when you think that the song is powering down and about to close out, boom, you get another chorus. Superbug isn't done yet.
No, it is not, Spencer. Did you already forget that it never, ever, ever stops?
And never, ever gives a fuck. That's true, yeah.
And to add on to that as well, so I mentioned Organ Farmer, the last track, was the shortest song on the album. Superbug is the longest song on the album, coming in at 6 minutes and 43 seconds. So kind of apropos to the theme of this bug never, ever, ever stopping.
Yeah, and to the guy's credit, this song doesn't overstay its welcome, in my opinion. Like, there is the necessary element of, okay, this song needs to be persistent and keep coming back, like the titular Superbug, but there are just so many peaks and valleys as far as the volume and the textures and the feel of this song that you never feel like it's going on too long. There's enough variety and changes in it to where it keeps the listener engaged, and I think they did such a good job with this one.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised to see, not surprised to see that it's the longest song, but I didn't know that off the top of my head. I have the tracks pulled up here, taking a look at it on Spotify just to look at the runtime of each, and it doesn't feel like a almost 7 minute long song. It like you said, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It feels just right as far as the runtime of it goes for this track. And before it does wrap up towards the end, it has one of the best endings of any of these songs. I love just the relentless, heavy grooving of the main riff over and over again, with Stu just screaming, "Superbug in my blood," over and over. It's so heavy, and you just want to scream along to it. You can feel his agony as this bacteria takes over him. So that's it for Superbug. Amazing ending, heavy as hell. So where do we go from here? Well, this next track is one of my favorite parts of the storytelling. I think it is super interesting and super cool the way they do it. It is called Venusian 1.
So Venusian 1, this starts the next stage of this story and the concept of the album. And these people are trying to get away from the Earth finally because there are no resources left. Everything is depleted. The Earth is completely uninhabitable, and it's time to get the hell out of there. So the lyrics back this up, of course. Forest desertified, ocean wave amplify, constant tornado sky, black water, no supply, otherworld surrogate, interstellar, our escape. So, these people are headed to space. They're heading to Venus, more specifically. And, Venusian 1, this is the first mission to Venus that these people are making. And, Joe, I don't think in the end it ends up going too well for them.
No, it doesn't. So yeah, this is kind of like a piggybacking off of Planet B, where, this poor boy and the other people that are poor and hungry and suffering left behind on the dying Earth, they're looking for an escape of their own. They can't afford to get to Mars where all the privileged rich people are. So they basically pull together any scraps and things they can to build a spaceship and try to get to Venus to colonize it for themselves. But Venus is a rough environment, as we'll find out. It's not quite as easy as they think it might be. As they're traveling to Venus, there's the lyric, "Outside air will bring you death, just make sure you hold your breath." So in a way, they know that it's dangerous, and they know that they could easily just be killed when they get there, if they even make it there. So, it's as simple as that. Just hold your breath and we'll be fine. You just can't breathe there. No big deal.
And the line right before that one, I heard there's a holy yellow sky. Just make sure you close your eyes. So you can't breathe and you can't keep your eyes open either. It's not sounding like a great alternative, but you can understand their plight, though, in trying to get away from this Earth. It's just become so desolate and depressing and uninhabitable. One thing that really won me over with this song and with this album in general is the finger tapping and the hammer-ons and pull-offs. My favorite band of all time is Van Halen. So anything that sounds vaguely reminiscent of what Eddie Van Halen did, obviously there are just thousands of imitators from over the years, over the decades. Anytime I hear that finger tapping or the hammer-ons and pull-offs in a song, I get hooked immediately. I love that guitarists can do that. And it's just such a fun sound, regardless of whether it's more your standard classic rock or something more heavy metal. It gets me excited, dude.
Yeah, for sure. There's lots of tapping throughout this album. There's heavy metal hammer-ons and pull-offs, and this song is pretty fast too. I feel like it's maybe not quite up-tempo like Organ Farmer was, but it's fast. It's definitely like we've moved past Mars for the Rich and Superbug. This shit is jamming, and you can feel sort of the desperation and determination and the frantic nature of their trip to Venus. It's chaotic, it's fast, it's messy, and they're so desperate to get off of Earth that they're willing to just go to this place where they, like you said, can't see or can't breathe, and to try to make a new life for themselves, because they have nothing to lose at this point.
The closing lyric on this song I found cool in terms of it being a callback to the opening track, because the opening track was, of course, Planet B, in which you heard the refrain, "There is no Planet B." This song ends with, "There is one Planet V," referring to Venus, and I love the way that Stu draws out V just for such a long time, and I think that serves kind of a twofold purpose. Number one, it's almost like, we said there was no Planet B at first, but hold on, nope, we made a discovery. We can go to another planet after all, and there's almost like a sense of victory or satisfaction themselves, but by drawing out that final V for such a long time. But on the other hand, we know how this mission turns out given Venus's hostile atmosphere to human beings, and that drawn out V can also be sort of interpreted as like that person's just final cry right as they enter that deadly atmosphere on their mission,
or they're just wheezing and for some oxygen.
It could be that too, yeah.
But the next track will wrap up their fate and continue this story of these poor travelers trying to get to Venus. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end so well. Let's check it out. It's Perihelion.
Dude, Perihelion.
Perihelion.
This one rocks, man, and this was an early favorite of mine. It's just such a catchy riff and catchy refrain, the Perihelion, over and over, and that develops too. Like later on in the song, that refrain, you get a little bit of a call and response, Perihelion, Perihelion, on the beats in between, and I like how it kind of develops and grows the song like that. I just enjoy how after so many trying to find the right words for it, there's a lot of just noodling and franticness about so much of the instrumentation on this album. I think this song for the first time since Superbug. You get a little bit of it on Superbug, and of course some on Mars for the Rich. Here on Perihelion, you finally get like almost a riff that you can hum a little bit, and that earns brownie points for me. I love being able to hum riffs. Dun, 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 dun. Like that, it gets me latched so quickly. And yeah, it is catchy, but the way the song develops in terms of how that refrain gets the call and response treatment later in the track, you also get a little harmonica. We were discussing this off mic earlier, Joe, that little lonely harmonica that's buried back there.
Yeah, this song for sure is a little bit of a structure change, and it definitely stands out on its own a little bit. It's unique to some of the other songs in a lot of ways, and yeah, we do. There's so far been no harmonica on this album, and if you're a fan of Giz, you know they are known for having that classic Ambrose harmonica throughout most of their discography, regardless of the musical style. But this album doesn't really have any, and like you mentioned earlier, it was mostly just Joey, Stu, and Cavs that made this whole album, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But when we finally do get a little bit of that harmonica later on in this track, it's really nice to hear. It kind of picks your ears up, and you're like, oh my god, Ambi's here. It's like he just walked into the room and real quick did a little like little harmonica notes. It's super simple, but it just sounds nice, and it kind of just comes in and pleasantly surprises you. And then he just, I guess, did that and then disappeared from the studio again.
Yeah, and the way I felt about this little harmonica and just that little wah, wah, it almost sounds like it's miles and miles away, and in the way that it reverberates. And like I said, it's lonely sounding. That's a quality I get from it. Yes, it's comforting to us as Giz heads because we know it so well. But to me, just in the atmosphere of this song and this album, it's all of a sudden, oh, the harmonica, but it sounds really sad and lonely out there. And what the specific thought that I have written down here, it's almost like the harmonica is saying, hey, remember me, the harmonica from Fishing for Fishies? I'm still here. It's okay, guys, I'm still here, but I don't like it. Help me.
And I'm scared.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it just makes the sound and the feel of the song and the album that much more powerful.
Yeah, it's comforting to hear, and hearing you kind of do your little impersonation of it, it's just those like two tremolo harmonica notes. It almost sounds like it's doing the first two notes of wah wah wah, which funny enough is kind of kind of makes sense with how our story goes here and how the adventure of our Venusian 1 travelers, what their fate ends up being is a little bit of a wah wah wah. Let's get into sort of just the overall story and the arc here in this song. Perihelion as a word, I knew I had heard it before. I had to re-look into the definition of it. But the exact definition I get on Google is the point in the orbit of a planet, asteroid, or comet at which it is closest to the sun. So we know that Venus is the second planet from the sun, because that was a lyric that was mentioned before. And, it's closer to the sun than Earth. So they're going towards the sun to get to Venus. So the name of the song, I think, is pretty creative and makes a lot of sense as to what it is about, as long as you know what that word means, which now you do. It is coming from our traveler's perspective, singing about getting closer to the sun, heading for Venus. As they get closer to the sun, like I said, their ship was kind of made out of whatever scraps they could pull together on Earth. So it's not exactly the most heat-resistant or, built proper for this sort of thing. Once they're outside of the atmosphere and they're getting closer and closer to the sun, they start burning up. The heat is killing them. It is horrific. Surely, they know that themselves and all their belongings are surely going to be damaged or completely destroyed the closer and closer they get. It is not good, and they can see their doom right ahead of them at this point.
Yeah. Melting humans and everything they bring. In a blink, the sun will drink their things. Grinning sun has sinners for dinner. There's a humor to that, but it's such a morbid humor just to hammer the point home that, yep, these people are screwed.
Yeah, such a creative way to talk about it. The sun is drinking them or drinking all their things, all their belongings. It's such a funny and way to talk about it, even though it is super grim and horrific to picture. It's the way they describe it with those lyrics makes it kind of funny to me.
Yeah, and to close my thoughts on this track at least, just keeping it a little bit lighthearted here amidst the doom and gloom. I don't know anybody personally named Perry, but if and when I do meet someone named Perry, I will have a hard time resisting as I see them walking in my direction, singing Perry, Perihelion, Perry, Perihelion. And
what about Perry, Perry, Platypus?
Okay, yeah, Perry, Perry, Platypus works too, yeah.
One more thing I wanted to say is this track has a hook. I guess it's the chorus of the song. A lot of them, structure-wise, don't necessarily have like a hard set chorus, but they do have, most of them do have repeated sections, little reprises, if you will. This one is one of my favorites. It is so catchy, and I love singing along to it. It's giver of life and the giver of speed, ever we take even her gravity, her glowing beauty is something to see, bigger and brighter she cometh to me. So of course the she in this is, they're talking about the sun and how glorious and bright and beautiful it is as they get closer and closer, even though it's killing them and burning them and drinking their things. They're, amazed. They're like sucked into the view of it and the heat and the brightness and the melody of that part. So most of these, like all of these songs, the vocals are mostly Stu doing his aggressive, like gritty metal voice. This part is sung and it sounds like, I feel like I'm mostly hearing Joey's voice, but it's maybe a mix of him and Stu together. And the way that it's sung has this like bouncy melody that reminds me of like a sea shanty or like a Viking like battle song.
That was a good catch there. I like that. Yeah.
But that's just the best way I could describe it. And it makes me feel hyped like I'm riding out to war, even though I know surely I'm going to die. It still gets me hyped up like, whatever, we're just going to take whatever comes of this and ride to our deaths with glory.
Yeah, sea shanty, or I guess in this case a space shanty, or a battle cry is an apt way to put it. Good catch. Yeah, I like that.
So even though they talk about how they're probably going to die and the sun's going to burn them and all their things up, we don't necessarily get an explicit ending. After that chorus is repeated one more time, we have the repetition of Perry, Perihelion at the end 4 times, and then there's that call and response that you were talking about earlier. But there's not really a conclusive ending. It doesn't explicitly say, oh yeah, and then they all burned up and died from the sun and, the end, that the dream is dead. And they don't really say that. It just kind of ends on the repetition of Perry, Perihelion, and we kind of have to just go to the next track to see where things go from there. So let's check that one out. The next one, Venusian 2.
So the title sounds familiar, obviously, but it is the second trip to Venus. I think this other group of people decided, okay, yeah, that first one didn't go as planned. Let's try it ourselves. What could go wrong? And I think we learn eventually what goes wrong in this case as well. And the lyrics hit you right over the head just like a frying pan. Like in the lap of the gods, the last one did explode. In a blaze all fiery, I sit in the cockpit. It may be a sinking ship, but fortune favors bravery. And like these guys are bold and full of bravado, and I think that they thought they were going to be different somehow, but yeah, they didn't really fare any better.
So one thing that I find interesting about this track, and I don't know if this is just how I picture the story in my own head or if this is how it was meant to be, but I picture this song as being from the perspective of a single person going to Venus by themselves. The first one was a trip with multiple people trying to do it, and they burned up and died, and it didn't go well. But this person is a singular person that just has nothing else to lose, and he's like, well, I'm going to give it a try now because I'm going to die here on this earth anyway. And I like to picture this one person as being our poor boy, as described from their perspective in Mars for the Rich. I picture this poor boy sees the rich people on Mars all happy. He's stuck on Earth. Everything's falling apart and dying. These people try to go to Venus to escape, and they burn up and die. But he's determined. He's like, I got nothing else to lose either. He's like the main character of our movie here. And that's kind of how I picture it, as like a movie. And he's like, well, I got nothing else to lose. I'm going to go for it because I'm going to die. Even though that last one didn't work out with those other people, I'm going for it. I'm getting on, and I'm flying on my very own ship, the Venusian 2.
Good thinking there, Joe, and I think you might be right as far as like picking up the story back to, as you said, the guy in Mars for the Rich, kind of our protagonist of the movie or of this story. And another thing that I think differentiates this one from Venusian 1, which the two, they're clearly related in a linear storytelling kind of way. They sound different. There's a different time signature to this song, and I think that's another way in which they accomplish the goal of explaining the fact that this is a different party, if you will, headed to Venus. This is a whole different concept, a different situation. Of course, he meets his demise as well, but I think it was a good musical decision by the band not to make Venusian 2 sound too much like Venusian 1. And I think it also accomplishes the goal of not achieving too much, or not I think it achieves the goal also of not exposing the listener to too much repetition or sameness.
Yeah, definitely. This track certainly, regardless of the name, very much stands out on its own from Venusian 1. And one thing that I wanted to mention about the sound of it as well, this one immediately evokes early Metallica for me. The beginning, especially when the verse comes right in with that, "In the lap of the gods, the last one did explode." The way he's yelling and sounds kind of like far away from the mic, and something about his voice sounds like a young James Hetfield to me, like early Metallica, like their first album, Kill 'Em All, kind of sound is like straight up the vibe it gives me right off the bat.
Yeah, I remember one summer years ago, I really got into Kill 'Em All, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's really evocative of that style and of that era.
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple different artists sort of the sound, like you mentioned, like Black Sabbath on one of the tracks and different things. They're definitely pulling influence from these classic 70s and 80s heavy metal bands, but twisting it in their own unique modern Giz way. And I just love how they do it. I love how they take influence from earlier artists and just create them into this inspired style, but in their own complete way. It's like you kind of get little tastes of different artists here and there, but it is uniquely Giz overall. Nobody else could do it quite like this.
Yeah, I'm seeing all sorts of chatter of that among the new album, Flight B741, on both the subreddit and even in some of our listeners' comments and engagement with us here on the show, that they do such a good job of drawing influences from other bands, but still putting the Gizzy stamp on it, if you will. I think one specific commenter used that term, that they put their Gizzy stamp on everything, so it's them. It's them, and they're not just ripping off of someone else.
So I want to turn back to some more of the lyrics as well, and there's not a lot of them. This is a short song, only 2 minutes and 44 seconds, so there's not a lot of words to dissect here. But you mentioned the first verse and some of that, and then the second verse starts talking about as he's getting closer and closer to Venus on this trip. It says, "Fingers getting warm and eyes are turning gold. Evil twin is coming in." I find this all super cool, super descriptive. I have this whole picture in my head, he's getting hot just like those other people. He's getting closer and closer to the sun. It's dangerous. It's warm. His eyes are turning gold, like what was previously described with the yellow sky of Venus is maybe kind of another reference to that. And evil twin is coming in. If you know anything about, astronomy, if you've ever had an interest in just our solar system in general, you might know that Venus is often referred to as Earth's twin because it is very similar size. I believe it's the closest in size to Earth as any of the other planets. And so there's kind of a whole history about it being the twin, but we know very well, even just from these songs, that its landscape and its habitability is not at all like its twin Earth. Not at all.
I'm glad somebody between the two of us was paying attention in astronomy class. I was on the verge of falling asleep at all times in that class, so I'm glad you pointed that detail out, Joe. I wondered what that evil twin lyric was about. So Venus is like Earth's twin. That's nice that you picked up on that detail, and I think that's cool that they dropped that little bit into the lyrics.
Yeah, as a kid, I always had a huge interest in space and everything. And, like a lot of kids wanted to be an astronaut or something. So when I listen to this album and I hear all these references to space and different planets and things, it just touches a special part of my childhood interest in studying space and astronomy. So to continue with the second verse here, it's only a few lines. He goes, "Weathering the storm, I put the birdie down. For the sin, I have a grin. Road trip with me, vitamin V, I see the ground." So as you're hearing that, birdie is obviously another word to say the plane or the ship. He is weathering that Venus storm. He ends up getting through it and landing on the physical surface of Venus. For this sin, I have a grin. He's smiling. He's like, oh my God, I actually landed. I made it. I don't know how long I'm going to live here, but I'm here. I made it. And I see the ground. So he can see the ground below him. He's landed and he's made it. We don't know how long he's going to make it at this point necessarily, but he's there, and that's a pretty major achievement. So then we just get the chanting of Venusian 2 a couple times as the song comes out and comes to a close.
Yeah, we don't know exactly how long he makes it, but we do know how he eventually meets his demise, and all you have to do is look at the title of the next track, Self-Immolate. Okay, so Self-Immolate presents perhaps one of my favorite lyrics on the album. I have gone insano, I lust for volcano. And then later, that gets a bit of a reprise of sorts. I have no vertigo, I lust for tornado. Gets mentioned later on in that verse. A little bit of that morbid humor comes back into it, and just such what an opening for one of the heaviest songs on the album.
Yeah, these first few lyrics here are kind of referencing back to the despair on Earth with natural disasters and, climate change completely destroying it. So you have all these things like volcanoes erupting and tornadoes and all this stuff. At this point, they're now on Venus, and they very quickly realized it's bad. It is rough here. I wish I was back on Earth with the despair and the natural disasters and things. This is really bad here. That quick. He's landed. He smiled for a second. And that quick, he's like, oh, hell no. This is bad. This sucks here.
Grass is always greener, huh?
For real. There's no grass there. There's probably not much grass left on Earth at this point either. But Venus definitely lacking the grass.
The terrain is always yellower or redder on the other side. How about that?
Yeah, sure. There you go.
I think, more appropriate to the environment that we're in on this album. I also, and I think we had some discussions over time, in fact, not long after you got me into this album, Venusian mal de mer. And I wondered for the longest time, what is that trying to say? So I looked it up, expecting to get a big old nothing in the search results. And here's where I should have trusted my Spanish education and knowledge of basic Latin roots. Mal de mer roughly, literally would translate to something like bad of sea, bad of ocean. It basically means seasickness. So, yeah, seasickness is what that translates to. So that's just going right along with the theme. I don't like it here. I'm uncomfortable here. This atmosphere, this place is hostile to me, and he's getting, Venus's special, horrible brand of seasickness as he floats on that planet.
One thing I want to say about the beginning of this song is it kind of reminds me of Planet B with the way it starts with the drums again. And this time it's not a super fast double bass drum. It's just a simple tom chugging along, just a dun-dun, 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 dun-dun. And it sounds like something's building, something's coming. And I love when the guitar riff kicks in. It's got this kind of syncopated, polyrhythmic rhythm to it, the way that the guitar and the drums play together. It sounds off rhythm, but it's like just this cool syncopated beat, and I love it. I love stuff like this. I love how they're adding these progressive elements to this old school thrashy style.
Yeah, they really incorporate the progressive elements really well. They kind of sprinkle them in at various points in this album and more prominent in other albums in the Giz catalog. But between that and the polyrhythms, I think those really help set them apart from other sort of popular heavy metal artists or other artists in their respective genres, as we eventually are to look at some other albums in the catalog. But just the musical genius is on full display here, as you mentioned, Joe, with that almost sounds out of rhythm or out of place, but it works and there's a purpose to it.
Yes. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other lyrics, specifically the chorus. Kind of reminds me of the chorus in Perihelion, just with its catchiness and that it's kind of sung or at least spoken in a way that isn't just Stu's gravelly metal voice. The chorus is, Venusian sickness dire, I want to be set on fire. Venusian gather while I Venusianly catch on fire. And then Stu screams, auto-cremate, self-immolate. I love it. It's not quite as catchy and like musical as the Perihelion chorus, but it's just really fun to say, Benu, seeing, sickness, dia, I want to be set on fire. I have so much fun with that every time I listen to this song. And of course, auto cremate, self-immolate being screamed. If you didn't know already and you didn't get the idea, self-immolate means to set yourself on fire. So our speaker here, our poor boy character, has immediately realized how much Venus sucks. It's making him sick. It's making him feel horrible. He just wants to be burned ablaze and just on fire and die. It's so bad.
Yeah, he's basically to the max of, all right, I'm a head out.
Yeah, I'm a head out. This actually sucked, but it was a fun way to go out, I guess. Please kill me.
Yeah, this song is definitely a strong penultimate track, and I've said it before.
There's that
I
word
think
penultimate again.
And there's that word again, man. Yep, can't forget it. It is a strong second to last track, and I've mentioned before on the show somewhere that I think the second to last track on an album has a reputation for, and I'm talking about music in general, outside of the band. I think kind of filler tracks have a reputation for occupying this second to last spot on the album. That's not the case here. I really think this is one of the strongest efforts on the album.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree. I love this song so much. I love the chorus is kind of fun and funny in a dark, twisted sort of way, like a lot of the lyrics on this album are, and it's got this groove. I love the guitar riff and the drums. That overall rhythm of it is super unique and makes it stand out. This song is just totally kick-ass. I love it so much. I always look forward to this one coming on as I get towards the end of the album.
So as the protagonist, if you will, of this album is basically begging to be set on fire, he certainly gets his wish in the closing track of the album, Hell.
Hell. Yes, the name of this last song is simply Hell. Our protagonist has gotten his wishes. He wanted to be on fire. He wanted to be burning and to die and get out of the pain of being on Venus. Well, he did it. He's in hell now. I think he starts describing, the first verse starts off, God, it's pretty hot down here under surface. Antichrist has tempted me with a purpose. So he's describing literally being in hell, which I think kind of just tells us very succinctly, okay, he got his wish and he died on Venus and now he is literally in hell. So I think that's kind of the general story here, is he's now describing the afterlife of being in hell. And, it again doesn't directly say that he did die on Venus, but I think it's pretty clear to me. That's how I picture it, is he got his wish, he burned up and died on Venus, and now he's here.
Can we say understatement of the century, that very first line of the lyrics? God, it's pretty hot down here.
Dag nabbit, why it's a little toasty.
Oh, golly gee, it's a little toasty.
Yeah. Maybe he's at this point dreaming of going to Antarctica now. Maybe that's where they were talking about on B741.
Hey, it all connects.
Ooh, it's all connected, confirmed.
No, but musically, this has to be one of my favorite songs on the album. And I'm not saying that lyrically it's not, but just the riffs and the overall instrumentation in this song just bring the album to such heavy but beautiful coda.
So right at the end of that first verse, we get the iconic line, remember where to enter, the door to hell is amber. Now, right off the bat, it's kind of like, I don't know what the hell that means. Why is the door to hell amber? What is that talking about? We'll get there when we get there. I have a thing that I saw on Reddit that it might be a reference to, but that's a line that's repeated several times, and everyone loves to quote that. After that first verse, only about 40 seconds into the song, we're moving quick, by the way. This is another really, really fast track. We're going out with a bang on the last one here. About 40 seconds in, there's this high-pitched guitar riff going... Okay, please mind my rough recreation of it. But you know what I'm talking about if you've heard it. Super, super fast. That is like, it just gets me hype as shit when I hear that. And it's kind of hinting at something that comes back right at the end of the song. We'll get there when we get there in a moment here. But while that fast guitar riff is happening, we hear chanting of the whole band just yelling, hell, hell, hell. And it's just very straight to the point. It's like almost comically over the top with how like metal it is. Like the imagery of literally just being in hell and screaming hell is like kind of goofy and cartoonish, but I love it. They're just having fun with it and they're going out with a bang.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of tongue-in-cheek on various points of this album, and I love that they got one more hit in that regard here.
Yeah, seriously. And there's also the lyric coming up in the song, Satan points me to the rat's nest. So it's actually an interesting, that's the first name drop of the album that we get is right here in the last song. He finally mentions the rat's nest. Another lyric that catches my attention is the start of the second verse where our character here says, "Here I was thinking I'd die," is the first line of it. And it's kind of funny because, like I said, I picture this song being the afterlife. Like he did die on Venus and now he's talking about, describing what it's like literally being in hell. But he doesn't seem to know that he's dead. He's like, oh, here I was thinking I'd die coming to Venus. And like, I didn't. But he doesn't know that he's dead and he's straight up in hell right now. And it's over. It's over for him.
It's over. And you get more of the band shouting hell over and over, and there's that ratty video that we were talking about off mic that's almost a companion piece to this album, kind of the behind the scenes, the making of, interspersed with some crowd shots, some live footage, but you see the band just shouting hell over and over in the studio in front of the mics, and they're just like laughing and smiling to each other because they're so engulfed in the ridiculousness of it all and how they're letting that tongue-in-cheek aspect of this recording fly, that, yeah, we're doing metal, this is dark metal stuff, yeah, hell. It's just wild and I love it.
Yeah, like I said, it's almost cartoonish the way they keep screaming hell. It's like kind of comical, but it's just, you could tell they were having fun here. And there's another repetition of that, I don't know if you'd really call it a chorus on that song, but that line that keeps getting repeated, remember where to enter, the door to hell is amber. Speaking of that, and I said, what is that supposed to mean? I found one post on Reddit this week while I was, gathering my notes for this episode of somebody talking about the song Hell being a reference to the video game Doom. Now, if you've ever played Doom, it's a first-person shooter. It's been around for a long time, and there's been several different versions of it, but in general the game is about this like super soldier that you play as who's on Mars killing demons from hell to stop them. Specifically, that's kind of what's happening in like the newer games. At least I've played the newer ones a bit. This person on the post here, so they say, hell from Infest the Rat's Nest is a Doom reference. Their quote here is, it's literally about people from hell infesting the rat's nest, parenthesis, Mars. Meanwhile, Doom is about demons, literally people from hell, invading Mars. Also, you could see that the door to hell is amber in Doom. So, like, the gateway to go to hell is like a reddish orange amber color. I don't know if this is a stretch, but it definitely sounds like it could be something. I mean, I don't know how much of big gamer boys the Giz lads are, and if they would go this far to make a heavy reference to Doom, but it's very possible. I'd have to look into that more and see if they've ever talked about it in interviews or, find a way to ask them myself if I ever get the chance. But I just thought this was really interesting to point out because otherwise I don't really know where the term rat's nest and the door to hell is amber part comes from other than maybe being this reference. So I just thought it was interesting to point out.
Yeah, and I've never played the game Doom for myself, but I think that theory might have some legs, though, because King Giz are not strangers to video game references in songs. I mean, Murder of the Universe and Altered Beast, I've learned a very clear video game reference from, I think it's like some old 80s game. So they're not afraid to go way back.
Yeah, there was a game, Altered Beast, that was really popular on the Sega Genesis back in the day.
That's what it was, yeah, the Sega Genesis. And then also the reference to Battleground PUBG from Ambrose in Cruel Millennial, I think, is another game reference.
Oh, yeah, true.
That's going a lot more modern as per the theme of that song. But no, again, I think this lyric or this theory might have a little bit of merit to it. There might be some truth behind it.
Yeah, I think this Redditor here may be onto something. I think we both have some words to say about the way this song ends, and I love it so much, but there's a lot to talk about. Spencer, I'm going to let you start. What do you think about the way this song comes to a close?
the song fades out. You think the album is ending, but then you hear that guitar riff. And then you get excited. Oh, there's more. And then I remember for the first time hearing this, looking at where the timestamp of the song was and going, oh, it's just a little teaser at the end. And you get the lyrics, 15 infantry paratroop into the propylene new scene. Hell's where they want to be. Infest the rat's nest. Is this maybe indicating that there were more people that followed the protagonist to from where he came and ends up where he did? That's my best guess. I otherwise have no clue what lyrically this part is about.
Yeah, so that lyric with 15 infantry at this last section that comes in at the end of the song, sounds like soldiers. Like there's a group of soldiers paratrooping onto Venus, I suppose, either to scope it out for themselves. Like, yeah, maybe there were more people that followed along. I don't know. These lyrics are a little strange to me as far as trying to figure them out. I'm kind of just coming up with my own ideas as I go here, but it is interesting. And then where it says hell's where they want to be, I think that's referring to, our other speaker that is now in hell, that, he wanted to be set on fire, basically would have rather been in hell than on Venus with how bad it was. So if these people are paratrooping or landing on Venus as well, they are also going to want to just die, and with how bad it is there. Maybe that's what it's alluding to.
Could be, yeah. Who's to say?
Earlier, I referenced a really fast, high-pitched guitar riff that comes in 40 seconds into the song. Well, here's where it makes that return. When this section comes in before these lyrics here, it's that same riff, but not high pitched. It's lower on the guitar neck and slower too. The tempo has changed in this last section here. And it is just so cool. I love how they made that little reference to it early in the song, and now it's here in full shredding form with this last section of the song. The only complaint I have about this part of the song is that it's too short. It could almost be its own song. It's so heavy and chuggy, and it's like a new riff other than that little sample. It's not like a major part of the song up until this point. It could be its own song, or at least go on for another minute or so. It's so heavy, so sick. It gets me, like, I was listening to this album again the other day in preparation for this episode. I was listening to it at the gym, actually, which is appropriate. I love putting on their heavier albums while I work out.
Oh, yeah.
And I was hearing just the end of this song as my workout was coming to a close, and I didn't want to stop. It like wanted me to I wanted to just keep pushing and going and moving weight to it. It's so heavy. I almost want to try to myself or see if anybody has made an extended ending to this song, because I just want to keep hearing it over and over.
Ooh, yeah. Good call to action. I wonder if that exists somewhere, or if it might exist, or if it might one day exist.
Another request.
yeah. But no, this is, I think we're in agreement here, Joe, on this is just like your classic example of keep them wanting more. I think this used to be a popular thing to do back in maybe the 70s, 80s, and like when bands would kind of put a little musical vignette at the end of an album that was possibly going to hint at how the next album would begin. And maybe this was like a nod at that trend, and they didn't necessarily have any intent of completing this, whether it be as a vinyl exclusive track or something like that. For all we know, they had no intention of making this into a fully fleshed out song anywhere, but dude, this is the Gizzverse. Never say never.
Yeah, that is my one wish. It is my only complaint about this album, that this section is not long enough. It doesn't need to be its own song. It just needs to go on for a little bit longer. But, a lot of their albums and a lot of their music, they have a lot of really long songs. They don't shy away from sitting on a groove or just jamming on something for a while. And this album is one of those interesting standout ones where all the songs are pretty short. Like we said earlier, Superbug was the longest track on the whole thing at 6 minutes and 43 seconds, which as far as Giz goes is not very long. Other than that, most of the tracks sit somewhere between the 3-4 minute mark. So everything's kind of short, and I just wish that they extended this one just a little bit. But that's my only complaint. Other than that, I love this album so much. Like I said, it was one of, if not the first full album I ever heard by them. So it has a special place in my heart and really never gets old for me.
Yeah, same here. Fantastic record, start to finish.
So that takes us to the end of our track-by-track discussion and analysis. One thing I want to mention here before we start to wrap up the show and to give our favorite songs and everything like we did last time, I just want to make quick mention of the music videos. Now, this is something I completely forgot to do in the Fishies episode. There was only 2 for that album, and you should look them up. They're really great. For Fishing for Fishies and Sigh Boogie both have videos. They're really, really awesome, really unique and creative. Infest the Rat's Nest has 3 music videos for Planet B, Organ Farmer, and Self-Immolate. I had seen the Planet B video a while ago and the Self-Immolate one. I actually just watched the Organ Farmer one for the first time before recording because I didn't know that was one. I somehow didn't see it before. And all the music videos are goofy and kind of ridiculous. Like, they were just having fun. They took the serious nature and tone of the songs and then just had fun in the videos. You know, this band loves to juxtapose silly goofiness with serious tone and real messages. So I think that's what they were kind of doing here. They just had fun with it. Planet B shows the band members kind of in a field outdoor at what almost looks like maybe like a rural small like airway or airplane hangar kind of area or something. But there's like a big field that they're in, and they're like barking and growling and like jumping around and prancing outside. There's all these cuts to different shots of them. They're also all wearing like the same outfit as well, like all one color. I think they have all got like these orange shirts on. It's really weird. I can't seem to take in any meaning from this video as how it connects to the song. That maybe there's something you could draw from it. I'm not going to dig into it too much, but it's just kind of silly. And so I recommend you check it out and for yourself. Also in the video, while the boys are jumping around and acting like wild animals, a man appears with a shotgun and just starts blasting at them while they're like smiling and running away. Again, I don't know exactly what the meaning behind it is. I'm not going to dig into it too much for now for the sake of time, but it's kind of silly and weird and interesting. The next one after that is the Organ Farmer video. This one's weird as well and kind of goofy. The band members are all in like an alleyway in between like a few brick buildings, and they're all shirtless and covered in Sharpie or black paint with the words Organ Farmer all over their bodies, on all of them. And they're the same actor, the same person from the Planet B music video makes an appearance, and they all start like smashing up this car together. And then they're in like a crowd of people and they're all grabbing onto each other and like screaming the words to the song into the camera. And then at the end, the actor like sprays like smoke into the crowd, which I guess maybe is to knock everyone out so he can harvest their organs. That's the only connection I could draw there. But again, another weird one. And finally, the Self-Immolate video is actually really similar to the Planet B video. It looks like it was shot in the same setting, maybe even the same day. The guys are in different outfits this time and it's at night. But the same guy, once again, shows up and starts drinking gasoline, and all the boys in the band are drinking gasoline as well. And then they're like walking around spitting it out, and then all of a sudden they're on fire. They're just like actually on fire. And you can see that they have some kind of like thick, what looks like Vaseline, like some kind of grease all over their face and hair. I assume that's some kind of fire retardant material because they are literally in fire. Like the guys in the band are actually walking around in slow motion on fire. So I think they had some kind of stuff on them to protect them, and they're wearing like fire retardant suits. Yeah, it's interesting, similar to the Planet B video and weird all around, but that one's probably the most appropriate and direct as to what that song's about. They are setting themselves on fire, and that's about it.
Can I just say that on all of that despite the crazy preparation and maybe any little bit of research into other band styles they may have done as far as what instruments are good for which musical styles and genres and what sort of time this all takes from them as human beings just to take all these different musical directions, the way they still manage to smile and laugh and goof around and have fun through it all, that is why the Gizzverse is the way that it is. That's why the Weirdo Swarm is just so passionate and so loving toward this band. They could be as serious or as weird or as crazy as can be, but at the end of the day, they're just guys being dudes. They're just playing music. They're having fun.
Guys being dudes, our special boys.
Special boys.
All right, Spencer, we're coming up on the end here. We're going to give our quick top 3 songs as well as a least favorite track, which might be hard to do, but we're going to force ourselves to do it on each one of these. Spencer, hit me with it. You go ahead first. What are your 3 favorite songs on this album?
My top 3, in order as they appear on the album, are Superbug, Perihelion, and Hell. Let's hear yours.
Those are fantastic picks, and I'm surprised we only have one that lines up there. It is hard to decide. Like I said, I love this album. I love all their music, and these are always going to be hard. In this order, in the order they appear on the album, I went with Bars for the Rich, Self-Immolate, and Hell. We both lined up on Hell. I had to say...
Bars for the Rich was so close for me. So close.
Yeah, that was close with Superbug, so I don't blame you for that pick there. Mars for the Rich is probably my favorite guitar riff, and I just love the overall groove of it. Self-Immolate I chose because it is heavy as shit. It has a super sick guitar riff, and I just love the overall rhythm, and the repetition of the chorus part is really fun and cool to sing along with. And Hell I had to pick just because it is such a great ending to the album. The last part is sick as hell. It's so good.
Pun not intended, right?
The whole song just feels like you're on a super fast roller coaster through hell itself, and I just can't get enough.
As for our least favorites, Joe, I think there might have been some writing on the wall with this one, for me at least. My least favorite is Organ Farmer. Unfortunately, the beginning and the end, while I understand what they were maybe going for as far as maybe being a goofy metal parody for that time on the track, it's just probably one of the least enjoyable musical moments for me on the album. So if I was forced to choose one, this would be the one, Organ Farmer.
Oh, that's fair. I can totally understand it. I love Organ Farmer. I love all of them, but I can see why you'd pick that. That's fair. Mine's a little different. I chose Venusian 2 as my least favorite song. And while I respect its position in the storytelling, I think the lyrics and storytelling are really interesting. There's just not as much substance to it as all the other songs. It's one of the shorter ones, and it just doesn't get me as hype as the other tracks. I can't help it. All these songs are so crazy and intense and fun to sing along to, and I feel like this one just doesn't have like a catchy hook moment like most of the others do. So I had to go ahead and put that as my least favorite.
I think we're going to find as time goes on in this show, we're going to have an increasingly difficult time choosing least favorite track on every album. I have a couple of albums in mind especially where I'm at a loss as to which song I would have to pick.
Indeed. With their entire discography, it's going to be really hard to do as we keep going through and talking about all these albums. It's always going to be heartbreaking to say that any of them are our least favorite.
All right, now it's time to go into most of what we like.
Most of what we like.
So as we mentioned on the Fishing for Fishies episode, Most of What We Like is the segment on the show where we highlight some music or even movies or shows or books, any form of media that we're digging lately. So what I've been digging lately, I recently revisited Lana Del Rey's sophomore album from 2014 entitled Ultraviolence. It continues kind of her melancholy LA noir feel that she put forth on her debut album, but less of its time electronic musical elements. So you hear a lot of those kind of synth elements on her debut album that feel really of the 2012, 2013 sort of feel. This one, in my opinion, is a little more timeless. Ultraviolence is a very ethereal, sometimes even borderline psychedelic feeling album, and overall more robust, I think, than her debut. And I think, Joe, that was at least a couple of songs that you mentioned to me off of that album that I've really come to enjoy lately. And then my second and final plug on this segment of the show, the band Krungbin, and I suspect this is a band that has some overlap with the Weirdo Swarm. For those unfamiliar, Krungbin is a Houston, Texas trio who are kind of gently psychedelic, a lot of clean tone electric guitar with some heavy reverb, and a lot of their music is instrumental, but they have some sparse, reverb-drenched vocalizations here and there. They do, though, have a couple of albums where there are lyrics at the forefront, and today I want to highlight the twin albums, Texas Sun and Texas Moon, which were, I believe, released just a couple of years apart from one another. Almost twin albums similar to KG and LW, but these two albums are collaborations with the recording artist Leon Bridges, and he brings just a real soulful touch to all the songs that he sings for them. So that's Krungbin, Texas Sun, and Texas Moon. That's some of my favorite music to chill out to after a long day at work on the car drive home. So I encourage you to check out some Krungbin if you haven't already.
I don't have a super specific album or anything to point out for this week, but I just want to give a shout out to two other artists that I am a huge fan of. First one is the band Everything Everything. I've been a huge fan of them for years, going back to around 2016 when I first heard their album Get to Heaven, which is my favorite album of theirs. It's amazing. I highly recommend you check it out. And I also I was just revisiting over the last weekend their most recent album Mountainhead. That came out in March of this year. It's their newer albums, they went in more of an electronic poppy direction. Some of their older stuff has more of a rock and guitar feel, but they're this alternative poppy like art rock band from Manchester in England, and they're super cool. They're not super mainstream or super popular, at least not in the States with most people that I talk to. I think they're more popular probably in the UK, but they're amazing, and they are literally my favorite band, right up there with King Giz, so I need to give them some love. And I also want to give a shout out to the artist Stella Donnelly. She's another Australian artist, a singer, songwriter, sort of alternative indie. She has an amazing voice, a beautiful voice. Her songs are very heartfelt, very personal. Some of them are upbeat and fun, and a lot of them are kind of more down and melancholy, but beautiful either way. I discovered her because a friend of mine invited me to see her live a couple years ago. I had no idea who she was at the time. She was playing at a really intimate small venue in Philly. And so I decided, tickets were cheap. I'm just going to go and check her out. And I have never fell in love with an artist more from seeing them live. Her voice was amazing. Like I said, really small venue. So it was like quiet. There wasn't a lot of people there. And you could just fully focus on her and get close. It was amazing. So that's Stella Donnelly. I love, she only has 2 full-length albums out. I suggest you check both of them out. The first one is Beware of the Dogs, and Flood was her last album. They're both great. If I had to pick one, Beware of the Dogs is probably my favorite of hers, but both fantastic either way, and can't recommend her enough.
Yeah, you got me into that one, Beware the Dogs, earlier this year, Joe, and I can attest to that. I really enjoy some Stella.
Yeah, there's sort of a pattern here. I'm always telling Spencer to listen to more Australian artists.
I need to find a way to inject some more stuff into your musical brain there. All right, well, that has been our album discussion on 2019's Infest the Rat's Nest. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure, if you haven't already, follow us on all the socials at Podagon Infinity. And if you have a question, a comment, or something cool you'd like to share about King Giz or Giz adjacent, really, we'd love to hear it. DM us or email us at podagoninfinity@gmail.com. We love all the listener messages and the support we've been getting online. We really do appreciate it. And we hope it continues. We can't wait to continue to build this community of all the good King Giz goodies.
Quick little programming note as far as our show for next week goes. We both have some travel coming up. Spencer's got a trip, and I'm going to be traveling to Michigan for the King Gizzard acoustic set over there. So it's going to be really difficult for us to record another episode in that time while we're both away. So there will be no new episode next Wednesday. We're going to be skipping a week, and then we'll be right back after that to talk all about our live show experiences, and it's going to be really great. So just bear with us in the meantime and hang tight till we get back. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, we're excited to share our live show experiences after the fact. And again, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and stick around for more. Until then, I'm Spencer.
I'm Joe.
Later, Gators.
Woo! Hail. Wait, okay.